is our honor, it is our pleasure to have Amberly Lago here today.
Without my glasses.
You know, I came across her story not too long ago, and I thought it was amazing. And then we sort of connected and reached out, and then I realized the person is amazing, and was very gracious to accept an invitation to come here and speak with you all. And then, after all that, the town and the community that she lives in has been through great tragedy in the last couple of weeks. And she is nothing but here for you, despite all that, and despite all hell breaking loose around her. And it's an amazing person, and I'm so glad you guys are here to hear her story. And I think it resonates with your stories in many ways, and hopefully will serve to connect at whatever level you need at the moment. So welcome Amberly Lago.
I'm so happy to see you guys. Oh my goodness. I feel at home here. I got off the plane and I was back in LA, and literally with the fires, my best friend lost her home and she stayed with me, and to go from being in the flames and all that to getting off the plane and coming here and seeing you guys, it's like, oh, like it feels like one of those moments when you get home and you take your shoes off and, you know, relax a little bit, take the Spanx off. And you're like, that's what it feels like being here. And so it's just a joy to see all of your smiling faces and how vibrant and bubbly you all are. And I guess the guys don't relate to the Spanx thing. Except for Matt. But you know, I thought, well, I got here a little early. I was in Santa Cruz yesterday, and I thought, man, I'm glad I'm going to be doing this. And then, as I was in the hotel room, I got the phone call that we may be evacuated, and I thought, oh, maybe I better get on a flight back home. I don't know what to do. And then I texted a good friend of mine, and she told me, remember PACER, and it was an acronym that I came up with. And then I walk in here, and I see that you have things that say PACER. Yes, and I thought, well, this is a sign that I need to write it down and share that with y'all. Because at any moment in time, our whole lives can be, you know, we never can control what life throws our way. And for me, you know, I was living the best life. I met the man of my dreams. I had the dream career. I'd moved to LA from Texas and was a dancer, and then I got into fitness, and I was on my way home from work, and I was on my motorcycle, and a car didn't see me, an SUV, and I got T-boned. And I thought, first thing I thought when I was lying in the ground, good thing I didn't know that you can bleed out when your femoral artery is severed, because the blood was gushing out like a hose. How many years ago was that? 8 years ago. And I felt like a guardian angel that came over and made a tourniquet on my leg, and I got rushed to the hospital. And my husband's a first responder. He's a lieutenant with the Highway Patrol, and he just retired. But he got to the hospital, and I could hear this crying. I didn't know, where is that loud? Who's crying so loud? What's going on? It was my husband, and I had never seen him cry. He's a first responder. He's seen it all, and he was freaking out. And so he was running back and forth in the hospital, in the ER, and I was taped to the gurney, and I said, get over here, Johnny, I need you to be strong for me. And that was the last thing I remember before the nurse came over and leaned over me, and she said, we're going to give you something now to make you feel better. And I woke up almost 2 weeks later from a coma, and the first thing they told me was, we're going to have to amputate her leg. Now, that's probably the last thing that being my livelihood was dancing. I mean, my first music video was with MC Hammer, Can't Touch This. And I know it probably looks like I can't do those moves, but I can. So I thought, no way. I'm going to do everything I can to fight to save my leg. And it took 34 surgeries. It took almost 3 months in the hospital. And it took over 1,000 hours of physical therapy, but they were able to save it. And all of that was actually the easy part. The hard part was when I was feeling so good that I had worked so hard to stand upright on my crutches. And I went in for a doctor's visit, and he took one look at me, and he went out of the room. And I looked at my husband, and I said, well, that's not really the reaction I was going for. And so he comes back in, and he says, are you the kind of person that likes to push through pain? And I said, well, yes, sir, I am. I'm from Texas. I've got a PhD in suck it up. I'm a cowgirl. And he said, well, you need to stop. You need to stop right now. You've got something very serious. You're going to be permanently disabled. You have complex regional pain syndrome. You need to get back in that wheelchair, and you need to stay there. And you're probably going to have to wear orthopedic shoes. And I was like, orthopedic shoes? I don't think so. And I was like, I pretty much stopped listening after the word never. But I left there, and I was devastated. It was like being punched in the gut. And I cried all the way to the physical therapist. And I went to his place, and he said, Amberly, what are you doing here? You don't have an appointment today. And I said, I know I don't, but I just learned something, that I'm going to have to work harder than I've ever worked before. Maybe that's why I feel so at home here, because it's like that's where I worked so hard. And they say if you don't cry, or if you cry, that means you haven't healed from something, but I had to learn to cry, because you know what? I sucked it up, and I sucked it up, and that only gets you so far. What I want to share with you today is that, sucking it up and getting gritty, getting too far, but I had to learn a lot more to get me through this everyday living in pain. I just think that, it does take grit, but it takes, by the grace of God, I had a little bit of light left in me, because I was to the point where I wanted to give up. I was in the hospital room, and I remember laying in the bed, and no one was there, and I was watching TV, and I'm embarrassed to say I was watching an infomercial about how to get a Brazilian butt. And then I was like, I'll never have a Brazilian butt. I was like, I had done a fitness video the day before my accident. I had filmed a fitness video. I had ran 11 miles in my best time. I was a runner. And now I was looking down at my leg, which I still at this point didn't know if they were going to save it. And now reality set in. My life is forever changed. And I could see and feel myself just falling down into that spiral of despair and starting to have a pity party. And I thought, you know what? I have a choice here. I can go down that road of despair, or I can choose to find joy and gratitude in this situation and have a life of joy and happiness. And so I thought, what can I do for that? And so I started, what I noticed was the single thing that really has had an impact on my joy and my happiness and my life and my recovery is resilience. And when I looked up resilience, like what that was in the dictionary, it did not describe me, because it said resilience is being able to go through something and then bounce back to its original form. And this is not the original form at all. And what I go through every day is not the original. I had to bounce forward, and I had to reinvent myself and figure out how I was going to do these things. And I wanted to share with you today, the first thing that I had to do was I had to be in acceptance. because I was not in acceptance at all. I was in denial. I didn't want to accept that I was going to live a life with chronic pain. When I went home and Googled what CRPS was, or back then, 8 years ago, I was diagnosed, it was RSD. And I Googled it, the first thing that came up was the suicide disease. And I thought, and no cure, and basically there's nothing you can do. And I thought, it left me feeling really hopeless. So I chose to ignore it. And you know, that was like, for me, when you ignore something or you deny it, how can you take those steps to try to make it better? And so it took me being taken to the hospital. I had gotten so sick because I was in denial and ignoring my body. What had happened was I was at work and my back was hurting. And so I asked one of the trainers if he had some Icy Hot, and I put that on there, and I wrapped my back up, and I kept training clients because I still do training. I'm a personal trainer. And it was getting worse and worse, but I thought, God, this is great. My leg doesn't hurt as bad. My back hurts so bad. I was passing a kidney stone. But with CRPS, the pain's so bad in my leg all the time that having a little reprieve from that and feeling it in my back, that was like, I was like, okay, I can do this. Well, a little later, I got home and I told my husband, I think I'm sick, I think I'm getting the flu. Then I told him, you know, I mean, I can usually suck it up. I couldn't. I started convulsing. I was going into shock. Infection, I was septic. I had to be rushed to the hospital. At this point, my husband's already been through 34 surgeries with me. He barely slowed down at the ER. It's like, here you go, get out, I'll see you later. And I call him and I'm like, honey, they're admitting me, I'm really sick. I guess I'm septic. And he goes, oh, again? You got to go to the hospital again? And so that was the moment that was really, that was an eye-opener for me. And the reason I share that is because I don't want anybody to have to get to the point to where a doctor's coming in and saying, if you wouldn't have come in, if you would have waited one more day, you would have been dead. That's how much I was in denial about where I was and what I had. And it was, I saw the mask out there for the art that you do, and I wore such a mask. On the outside, I put this mask on that I'm okay, and I smiled, and I didn't show that how much pain I was in. But on the inside, I was dying inside. I was broken. Mentally, spiritually, physically, I was broken in every way. And until I started to accept where I was, that is when my journey of healing truly began. And it wasn't even for me, it wasn't just accepting that I had this chronic pain that I was going to have to live with for the rest of my life. For me, it was accepting all my scars. 3 years ago, I would not have been caught dead wearing a skirt. I would not have shown my scars because I hated my leg. And hate's a 4-letter word in our family. I don't let my kids say hate. And I looked down at my leg and I said, I hate my leg. And I told my husband, I said, I just wish they would cut it off. And he said, I can't believe you just said that. I said, you're lucky you have 2 legs. And that was like, ooh, talk about shifting your perspective. But my perspective was really shifted when I went to my doctor, the doctor who saved my leg, and he looked down at my leg and he put it in his lap. I sat in front of him. He put it in his lap and he was just like rubbing my leg and looking at it like it was a piece of art, like it was his masterpiece. And I thought, if he can look at it that way, then I can learn to love it too. And that was the first day that I really started to shift and start to love my leg a little more and stop covering it up. And boy, when we can just own who we are and where we are, it is like such freedom just to stand where you are and go, this is it. This is my life. This is the cards that I've been dealt. Now I just have to figure out what to do next with it. So I'm grateful to I show my scars now just so others know that they can heal too. That no matter what your situation that you're in now, or whether it's those internal scars from abuse or whatever, you know, for me, whatever I tell myself, my mind can tell me some pretty awful things, and I have to remind myself, talk nice to yourself. So whether it's that internal or it's the external scars, if we can just learn to accept those, that's the first step. I passed out some cards, and I wrote on here about acceptance. And if you want, take a moment and write down something in your life that maybe it's a relationship you're in, maybe it's your pain. How many of you in here have been diagnosed with CRPS like me? Wow. It's so amazing to be in a room with other warriors. I think anybody dealing with chronic pain, I feel like we're the most resilient people on the planet, because we wake up every day and have to continue to step forward every day. But on your card, write down something that there's something in your life, whether it's your pain or a job or a relationship, something that maybe you're having trouble accepting, but that you can write down that today I'm going to learn to accept whatever that may be. And for me, I find that writing was really a very useful tool for me. I started writing in a journal when I was really young, when I was like 8. And when I was in the hospital, when I was going down that road of despair, and I thought, I've got a choice, I've got to do something about it. And one of the first things I did was, somebody had brought me a little journal to the hospital, and I grabbed it and I started writing in it. And I think at first I just wrote in it as like a coping mechanism, and also a way to remember things, because I would have a surgery, then I'd have a day of recovery, then a surgery, then a day of recovery. And so, and at the end, and there were some days when I just wrote pain, and that's okay. But writing was really a good tool for me to get out of my head and put my thoughts and feelings onto paper. And at the end of every day, I would write down who came to see me in the hospital. I would write down if somebody brought something for me, because that was my way of, I didn't want to forget to write them a thank you note. I was brought up in the South by a Southern Belle mom who was like, you got to write those thank you notes. And so I noticed by writing that at the bottom, what I was grateful for, that became a gratitude list for me. And instead of focusing on what was going wrong in my life, I started focusing on what was right in my life. And I do that every morning when I wake up. Gratitude to me is alchemy. It is, and by alchemy, I mean gratitude in my life has turned what I can't do and to what I can do. What I don't have to what I do have. And I use it even standing in the fires in LA. I was with my best friend, and we walked up, took back roads because it's all the road closures, and I walked up and we saw that what was left, it was burned to the foundation, it was still smoking. She lost everything. But we were grateful, we were alive, we had each other. She had her animals. So whatever you're going through in your life, if you can take a moment to be grateful, it shifts your perspective. It really does. And also, it interrupts anxiety. I was so anxious yesterday, nervous to come speak to y'all, but also nervous that I would be called back home to being evacuated or whatever. And I was nervous, and I thought, I need to interrupt this. I need to interrupt it with gratitude, and it worked. And I thought, wait a minute, no, I'm excited to go speak with them and grateful for you asking me, and it shifts your whole perspective. So if you can focus on something that you're grateful for, I find that really, that's medicine to me. That's my medicine. When I was diagnosed with CRPS, I thought, well, I'm going to try to do everything I can to get better. So I did spinal stimulator, spinal nerve block. I did spinal radio frequency. I did ketamine infusions. Now, I had never done a ketamine. I'd never done a drug in my life. I'd never even smoked pot. Now I'm going for ketamine infusions where they are basically giving me Special K all day to try to reboot my nervous system. At one point, I was taking 73 homeopathic pills a day. I had tried Eastern, Western medicine, you named it, I had tried it, nothing was working. So I had to figure out what can be my medicine. And gratitude is part of my medicine. Surrounding myself with you is my medicine. The amount of, just like when I said I walked in and I felt, oh, I'm home because I'm with you, is medicine. But if you want to also write something on your card that you're grateful for, anything. For me, sometimes I'm grateful for that my pain was an 8 and it's a 9 today, so maybe it'll be an 8 again tomorrow. Or I'm grateful that I'm able to walk today instead of having my leg up. I'm grateful for little things. I'm grateful when I can get my skinny jeans on and it doesn't flare up my nerve disease. That's a win. So it can be a little or a big thing. So yeah, take a minute and see if in your day, if you can start your day off. If I don't start my day off with waking up and I read out of a few books just to kind of, it's just like a one-page book just to kind of get me grounded for the day. I do my prayer and I write 3 things that I'm grateful for or more. So yeah, and see if that changes your day, because the first thing I want to do is like grab my phone and check Instagram or check my emails, and so it is an effort to not. I'm not saying it's easy. It's an effort and it's a habit that I've had to get into. But I figure if I can make that habit and if I can do that, and that takes 10 minutes to 30 minutes even of my day, and that changes my whole day, then it's worth it. And so I do that. I talk about the importance of community. For me, like I said, when I was in denial about CRPS, I didn't tell anybody that anything was wrong. I didn't want the moms at school to ever see me with crutches. I tried to walk as best as I could without a limp. I was always covered up, and it really wasn't until, and I was embarrassed of my wheelchair, and nothing against people in wheelchairs. I grew up, my brother's disabled. He's lived his whole life in wheelchairs. I just didn't want to be one. I thought that's not the life for me. I didn't want to do that. We went to Universal Studios, and I was really upset because I had to use a scooter. And I would get out of the scooter as much as possible. I didn't want to be sitting in it. And my youngest daughter and I were off doing something, and I look at my scooter, and SpongeBob SquarePants is sitting in my scooter. And I thought, oh my God. And he wouldn't get out. And I was like, oh wow, this scooter's a big hit. And I thought, for the first time, it's all how we look at it. If I look at it as this is enabling me to get around the park and have a good time with my family, and if SpongeBob likes it, I can like it too. And I don't have a problem with it anymore. So sometimes it's a community of people, and when we get together and when we can share stories like this, it helps us to accept where we are and move forward. When I started talking about CRPS a little bit more, and I started talking about it on social media, I found there were so many people more than I ever imagined that live in pain. If it's not CRPS, it's with my dad had back surgery, his back is fused, he lives in pain. There's people with fibromyalgia, there's so much pain out there and we don't have enough hope. And so that's why I was inspired to write my book, is because I wanted to give some hope that was given to me. I am so passionate about sharing that hope with others and the tools. And when I found my community of people, I call them warriors, because like I said, I think we're the most resilient people on the planet, that we can get up every single day and do the best we can despite living in pain. I feel like when we come together as a community, we get stronger, and that really strengthens our resilience. But I also found, and I don't know if you find this, but there are some people when you're around them, they can suck the energy out of you. And I call those people doggy downers. And we need to be around puppy uppers. We need to be around people that are building us up. And I found that especially when we're living in this pain and going through this, we really need to have people that believe in us, that encourage us, that believe in not just us, but believe in our dreams. It's so important to be around positive people. I've heard somewhere that find your five. Have you ever heard that? There's some speaker that talks about find your five, and that basically is really you are who you surround yourself with. And so be very careful who you choose to surround yourself with, and make sure you're choosing people that you either aspire to be. Like for me, I see people and I'm like, oh, I want that. And I'm not talking about, oh, I want that shirt, even though I want her, I want that purse. I'm talking about, I want that life that they have. I want that feeling that they have. They look like they're enjoying life. And so surround yourself by people who are going to be uplifting like that. So take a minute, and on your card, think about, you can write down someone that you really, in your community, and by the way, this is such an amazing community. If you just look around at each other, I can feel the love that you have just being together. And I can feel the love when I walk in this facility. It's such a beautiful place. I'm saying I hope you come to LA. I would love to just replicate this and bring it to LA. But write down somebody that you're truly happy to have by your side. It could be the person sitting right beside you. It could be your husband or your wife. I know for me, my husband has been my hero. He has stuck by my side through this whole entire journey, because when you go through something, whether it's a trauma or a surgery or you're dealing with chronic pain, it's not just you. Like I say, for me, this isn't my story. This is our story. This is my husband. It's my kids. It affects the entire family. And for me, that was one of the things that people ask me a lot, well, where do you get your inspiration? For me, my kids are my biggest inspiration. When I first got home from the hospital, I had to stay in a hospital bed downstairs. And there were days when I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I can even sit up. At this point, I was still using a bedpan and not able to even use the bathroom on my own. And all I would have to hear was my daughter's voice say, Mama. And that was it. I got up. Then I thought, I want to make and set an example for my kids. I want them to see me as not just surviving. I want to teach them how to thrive despite their circumstances. Because you know what? When you're surviving, you're just like in fight or flight mode. You're just like full of adrenaline, or And I thought, I don't want to live my life like that. I want to thrive. So I want to do everything I can to thrive. So, yeah, like I said, my husband, he's my hero, although no one's perfect. He says he's going to trade me in, that my warranty's expired. but that's part of it. That's part of marriage. But can anybody guess the question I'm asked most about? Anything? Anybody have a clue the question I'm asked?
How much pain you're in?
Yeah,
Would you change anything?
that's a good one. How much pain I'm in? A lot of people say, even close friends.
How are you?
Yeah, they say, well, are you in pain now? And I say yes. Yes, every day. And they don't understand that. They don't get it. They don't, I mean, my husband understands to a degree, but still, just like the other day, I got home and I could barely pick my fork up to eat dinner. I said, I'm so tired. And he goes, why are you tired? I said, well, I worked, I had a conference, I did a podcast, I did all these things, and I was a mom and a friend, and in pain on top of it. So it can be really, really hard. But I want to share some of the things. So as we were sitting there and we talked about that, my husband starts saying to me, well, you got to pace yourself. You got to pace yourself. You don't pace yourself. And I was like, I do too pace myself. He goes, no, you don't. You got to pace yourself. And so I was sitting there and I started writing down on my napkin. Because really I just wanted to prove him wrong. But I started writing down, and I wrote down what it means to pace, because I thought I also had a friend say, what is the process in what you go through that enables you to still train clients, to show up at school for your daughter, to be the wife that you are to your husband, to be a friend, because I had gone somewhere with her. She goes, what is it that you go through? What is that process? And so I started writing down on a napkin, and I thought, well, this is kind of silly. Then I walk in here and I see that y'all have pacer written on the board. I'm like, this is a sign. I need to share this with y'all. So this is like totally off the cuff, and I was like, I hope I can spell. But the first thing I do is I prepare for pain. When I say prepare, I talked about every morning I start my day off with doing a reading, getting on my knees and pray, man. I get down on my knees and, write gratitude. But it's not just preparing for that. It's everything I do. I still went to the gym this morning. I didn't get to do a lot, but I did a little bit because I know movement makes me feel better. It's not just the endorphins that it gives you, but a lot of times when we're in pain, for me anyway, it can cause anxiety or fear. And the best thing to do when you're in that place is to move your body, whatever way you can. I couldn't do lower body stuff, but I could do upper body stuff. And any kind of movement, I think from the years of dancing, and I was in track, and being an athlete my whole life, I'm glad I knew to do that. I'm glad I knew that was just instilled in me to move my body. It's also been my food. I've changed how I eat. I was always eating pretty healthy, but when you are in pain, you have to really, I was desperate. I was grasping at straws, whatever I could do. So I've changed my diet. I had to cut out any anything that would inflame. I don't know if you guys notice if you eat certain things. Sugar. For me, I used to love wine. I loved wine. A little too much there at the end. And I had to cut that out because my leg would just blow up like a balloon. And so that's part of the preparation. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I can't wear just anything and everything I want to wear. There's a certain brand of shoes that works for my foot because my foot's deformed. And my ankle's fused. I can't wear tight things on my leg most of the time. So it's really preparing what I'm going to wear. I used to carry a backpack with stuff. Now I roll things. So it's preparing. Pushing it down. Pain demands to be heard. We can only stuff it down so much. We need to accept it. And once I accept it, then I can go, okay, now I've accepted it's there. What can I do? I'm going to cowgirl up. That's my go-to. I'm from Texas, where that's my motto. But it's a fine line, because if you cowgirl up too much and you push past your threshold, then you can get worse and you can be stuck in bed. So finding that balance of how much can you cowgirl up or cowboy up. I'm not trying to leave you guys out. You cowboys out. So it's really like, that's one of my challenges, is just figuring out that balance. But if I don't cowgirl up, and if I go just, I've had my husband say a lot of times, why are you going to the gym? Why don't you just sit back and put your leg up? Well, I don't want to sit in it. I want to do something about it. The next thing is I had to embrace it. And by embracing, I had to love my pain. My pain has actually been one of my biggest teachers. It has taught me compassion, empathy, understanding. I actually had one of my clients tell me that I'm a better trainer now. When I felt so broken, and how am I ever going to train clients again? But it was because I could better understand her pain. So when we can embrace the pain, we can show ourselves a little love. Because man, was I hard on myself. I still am hard on myself. But I was so, I would get caught up in that. Well, I should have done that. I could have done that. That shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's like, that doesn't get you anywhere. It's like, what can you do? Let's focus on what you can do. And then the last thing is rest and recovery. Now, that's the part where my husband said I was full of crap. And because that's hard for me, because to me, I had to change my mindset. I used to think rest and recovery, that meant I was a quitter. That meant I failed. I stopped. Because, growing up in track, they didn't care if you were throwing up. They were just like, get off the track to throw up, keep running. In dance, it was like, she didn't care if my toes were bleeding. Keep your point shoes on. The show must continue. So to me, it was, I didn't know how to rest, so I've learned to rest. So yesterday, when I was freaking out a little bit and my friend texted me, remember Pacer, I was like, oh, yeah. If I leave one of these things out, then I'm not able to move forward in the best way that I can. But if I remember, and it's work, it's a job doing all this, but it's worth it in the end. So I really hope that, I don't know what's next with CRPS. I don't know. But what I can say that I am stepping forward with grit, anchored in my faith, and I hope that anything I said today, like you asked if I would take it all back. I used to get caught up in if I would have left that parking lot 1 minute later, but that just gets me stuck. And so I don't even think that way, and I'm actually grateful. I know that sounds weird, but I'm actually grateful because it has taught me so much, and it has led me down a path where I get to meet people like you, and who can resonate and understand what, we understand what we're going through. And so I wouldn't take it back. But I do want to spread more awareness for CRPS so that we may find a cure. And I'm happy to tell you really quick that I have a friend, my daughter rides horses, and our friend who rides horses, she got thrown off. I had a really bad break in her leg, and because she knew I had CRPS, she felt a lot of pain, and she went to Dr. Prager, who's in LA, and she was diagnosed with CRPS. Now, the likelihood of her being cured or put into remission, she's already feeling better, but are so much greater, and that's because we have a voice and we're talking about it. And I think the more that we share our story and we step into owning our story, the more we can make a difference. So I hope that you guys are left feeling uplifted and know how grateful I am to just be here with you guys. And I would love if you have any questions at all, to ask me any questions or share anything that you want to share at all. And thank you so much for having me here.